Hey, what's going on? The Dharma Guy here with Dharma Time. Welcome. A little vacation there. We weren't on last week because I was with the Dope Doctor and the Couch Live. We were doing UCF. So for those of you who showed up, awesome. Thank you very much. And for the rest of you, hopefully you'll get a chance to listen to the show when we put it up. It was an awesome show, by the way. We had a couple of game shows going on and putting out some facts for drug and alcohol addiction, and it was actually a really good time. So thank you, Orange County, for making that possible, as well as students and faculty at UCF. Our sponsors that came through was Serenity Springs Retreat, and I think it was Journey Pier as well. I believe, was it? My producer over here. I don't remember the third one.
Yeah, Journey Pier.
Yes, thank you. I thought so. Speaking of sponsors, let's do some house cleaning really quickly. So the sponsors for this show, we couldn't do it without them. We have Retreat Premier Addiction Treatment Centers. I always still write it down. I don't want to mess up anybody's name. We got Journey Pier, the Now Matters More Foundation, and of course Orange County, very, very supportive of us. Speaking of Now Matters More Foundation, on March 19th, we have our golf tournament coming up. If you want to participate in that, you can go to nowgolftournament.org. I think we still have a few sponsorships available for those of you looking to get some sponsorship out there. And for the rest of you who are wanting to play, by all means, come along and play. I think I saw somebody who plays on our Facebook there. I think it was Dan. Hopefully you come out there and play. I think you're a fantastic player there. Much better than I am, of course. Anyways, so today... Today, I've been looking forward to today's show. First off, let me say, weather is fantastic. I'm loving the 50 degrees, 50 plus. I know my elder statesman over here is not approving of the weather. He's get off my lawn, it's too cold.
No. I like the weather. I just need a jacket, and you're in shorts and a T-shirt. There's a difference.
So I'm digging the weather. So for those of you who are snowed in at the moment, I am a little jealous. I prefer the lack of scorching heat. Anyways, all right. So today's show, man. I've decided to change up the format just slightly. I think I'm gonna do more of the daily or monthly topics that are in the news, and start trying to give some spiritual perspective on them. Make it a little bit more relevant and give you guys something, as opposed to just me here pontificating on Buddhism for an hour. And the first topic I decided to go with is going to be a topic I think that if you're listening to this, there's a good chance at least one of you, if not more, are going to be a little offended today. That's not my aim. That's not my goal, obviously. Having said that, it's such a sensitive topic, and I do have an interesting perspective on it, that it's safe to assume that at least one of you is going to be offended. And then for that, I apologize. I don't mean to. If you do get offended, by all means, reach out to me, and I'd love to hear why. I'd love to have a dialogue with you to see if we can't maybe share perspective and come to some sort of an agreement or an understanding, if you will. And I think that's the theme of today, is actually perspective. So the for those of you who saw the social media, you know what my topic is going to be about. For those of you who did not, my topic today is going to be metoo, the hashtag metoo movement. And for those of you who have been living under a rock for the past several months, let me explain to you very briefly what the metoo movement is. Harvey Weinstein kind of got outed, if you will, for being a, I don't know, let's call it sexual predator, I guess. I'll call it that. I'm not sure if that's what they're calling it in the media, but that's what I'll call it. He's exposed himself. He's been kind of a tyrant for the female of the species, if you will. And I guess for many years it was known, and nobody did anything about it. And then until finally somebody came out and voiced their issues that they were having, and it kind of caught fire. He ended up getting fired, and then a laundry list of other culprits, if you will, came too. The biggest names that I can think of at the moment, Kevin Spacey was a huge one, and then but that wasn't male and female. That was actually male and male. God, there's so many more. Louis C.K. was another big one. There's just a ton of them coming out of the woodwork right now, and everywhere you turn, it seems like everybody's got an opinion or a perspective on the Me Too movement. And how it got to Me Too was somebody got up. I want to say it was, I'm not even going to try to guess because I'm sure I'll get it wrong. But somebody got up and had a speech in which they essentially said Me Too. They related to the individuals who were experiencing this and said, hey, I've been through this as well. I know what you're going through. And it would hashtag Me Too was born. And then I don't know about you guys, but my news feed went crazy with a ton of people who were all telling not necessarily their detailed story, but at least letting us know that they too have experienced some form of sexual harassment, sexual assault, whatever it may be. And so the Me Too movement was born. And it seems like now we can't escape. We can't go through a week without hearing somebody or someone getting ousted or ridiculed for something associated with it, be it a culprit, somebody who attacked somebody else or offended somebody else, or be it somebody who has an opinion that seems to piss off some people, which hopefully doesn't happen today. But anyways, so it got me to think, and I've had so many discussions on this with friends and family members, and I just felt that it was appropriate to at least kind of put it out here through the show and kind of give a spiritual perspective, trying to help people kind of wrap their head around this. Because at the end of the day, it's one thing to out it, it's one thing to have opinions, but where do we go from here, right? How do we fix it? How do we move forward? How do we grow from this? And I think that's what I'm going to try to do my best to do today. Now, I'm fairly positive that we'll have maybe another version of this type of show in the future, but today I think this is where we'll start. And I think the first way I want to start this is I'll start with the men. I'll start with the male perspective. I'll say that we as men, we don't know how to act. We don't know how to behave. We really don't. And for the guys listening to me, as I continue to talk about this, hopefully you'll kind of understand what I mean by this. And ladies, maybe this will be a little enlightening for some of you to realize that we just don't know how to act. We really don't. In today's society, we're raised, everything we were raised to believe that was masculine, and everything that we were raised to believe that was right or wrong, all those lines are starting to get kind of blurred for us, and nobody is talking to us as if we don't know. Everybody's just assuming that we know or that we should know. And to be frank, we just don't. We don't know how to act. And it's not because we're stupid. By no means are we stupid, but the reason why we don't know is because we're just not being educated on that. Nobody's taking the time out to tell us. We're all just expected to just know certain things. And I'll start with myself, right? I'll start with some of my own misconceptions that I've had to kind of address over the years, right? For those of you who don't know me, I'm a very large individual. I'm over 6 foot, well over 200 pounds. I've been bodybuilding and things of that nature, and piercings, tattoos, and whatnot. And for me, I've had to understand that whether my intentions are that or not, I can come off intimidating to people. And it's something as somebody with those measurements and that look, if you will, I've never had to address. I've never related to that. It's hard for me to comprehend that sort of fear, that sort of intimidation. And so when I speak to people, it kind of never really enters my head. It never really, it never occurs to me that my voice fluctuations, if you will, or my mannerisms, my directness, if you will, it never even occurs to me that some of that stuff could be not I won't say offensive, but intimidating, scary. And so I've had to come to terms with that. I've had to learn that and understand that over the years. And thankfully I have, some people around me who love and care about me enough to have patience and help me understand it and help me think about it, right? But not everybody has that sort of support system around them, and I think that's where we kind of take that for granted, if you will. So the thing that I think men need to understand is the perspective outside of their own, right? And I'm gonna use the word perspective a lot today because I'm starting to realize more and more that's where we're missing the boat a little bit as a society, for men and women, but just people, human beings, is perspective, and the main crux, if you will, that I'm gonna kind of try to get out there today is the difference between absolute and relative. Absolute perspective is absolute. It's a fact that we can all agree on. All perspectives wind up there. Relative is more of an opinion. Relative is what are you comparing it to and how do you see that? The example that I like to use lately is let's say there's a flower, right? And I look at the flower and I see green. Somebody else looks at the flower and sees turquoise. My wife has an amazing artistic ability, so she might look at it and see a completely different color that maybe we don't even have a word for yet. Who knows? A dog might look at it and see, blue. And a blind person doesn't see the flower at all. And so the question would be, who's right? Well, the answer is everybody's right and everybody's wrong. It's all of those colors and none of those colors. And what I mean by that is, your own perspective, the things that you've been through in life, how your retina, how your body, whatever it may be, interprets different colors and looks at that. Nobody can take that from you. If I see green, there's nothing you're going to say or do to me that's going to make me see turquoise. That's just how my body, my brain, and everything else interprets that. And so, for you to sit back and try to tell me that I'm wrong and you're right, that it's actually turquoise and not green, I'm going to fight you tooth and nail on that, and vice versa. And I think that's where we're at now as a society. Is we spend all this time drawing lines in the sand and trying to tell everybody why we're right, as opposed to realizing maybe I'm not right. Maybe there's a different perspective to this. And so for men, what men have to understand and learn is whether you intend to or not, you might be really pissing off the women around you, man. You might be scaring them. You might be harassing them. You might be, offending them in ways that you have no clue and you never intended on doing, right? And for the record, I'm not referring to the instances where men are doing something, completely horrible. I'm not talking about, exposing yourself in a hallway and ejaculating into a cup or something like that, or a plant. I'm not talking about those instances. Those are pretty obvious as far as I'm concerned. If you're at a level in your life where you don't know that that's wrong, I think you need more help than I can give you via a 1 hour show on WPSN. I think you need some serious help if you can't differentiate between that being right or wrong. What I am referring to, though, are a lot of the misunderstandings, a lot of the more subtle issues of harassment and inappropriate behavior, things of that nature. So I think men, we have to get better at understanding that our perspective isn't the only one. Our way isn't the only way. And this woman who's sitting in front of you might not appreciate some of the stuff that you're saying to them. Even in your mind, you think it's okay and you think there's nothing wrong with it. You're just being, flirtatious, or you're just being direct, or you're just being honest, whatever way you want to describe it. That it might not be taken that way, and you could be doing some very serious damage. I think that there was one recently, and I don't know all the details, and I'm going to try not to get into all the details, but there was one recently with I think his name was Arniz, one of the comedians, I guess, and it came out that there was a date that they had. He went to an event, I guess, and he met this girl. They exchanged information. They had a date afterwards. And during the date, they went back to his house and had like a nightcap, I guess, if they even still call it that. But anyways, they had so they went back, had drinks, and relaxed. And then essentially what happened was he made it known, I guess, that he expected some sort of a sexual favor from the night. Like that's kind of where his mind had it leading. And from what I remember and what I understand, she didn't necessarily feel the same, but she went along with it anyways. And I believe there was oral sex performed. And then the following day, she, I guess, woke up and regretted it. And she didn't like the way it went down. She felt that she was assaulted. She text messaged him and kind of told him that. And his reply was, I'm sorry you felt that way. I didn't see it that way. I felt we had a good night, and it ended, with, mutual connection, if you will. I'm trying to be politically correct in how I say that. But anyways, so I think that's an interesting moment there, because that right there is obviously how the perspectives differ. From his perspective, he didn't do anything that was inappropriate. From her perspective, she felt pressured into doing something. And so I think that's where we kind of in this Me Too movement, we have to start to navigate closer towards, and that is some real legitimate definitions, right? And now I'm going to kind of bring in the female perspective just a little bit, the best I can anyways, and try to help the female population, if you will, maybe understand a little bit more where some of the men are coming from, who aren't necessarily trying to offend you, right? And that is, let me first start with a story, right? There was a story, and I won't say who told me the story, just in case they don't want me to put it out there, but somebody I know, they worked in a more male-dominated field, and they were in a room, essentially, where they were kind of in control of things, and it was by themselves. Another individual came into the room, and when they walked into the room, they made a comment about her breast, something along the lines of, those are big, or I like those, or something pretty inappropriate under most people's definition. And this person then in kind said, hey, I don't appreciate that kind of talk. Please don't talk to me that way. Leave and don't come back until you can respect me more. And that situation stopped, right? The person left, they came back, everything was good. Nobody called, harassment or assault or anything of that nature. They kind of let bygones be bygones and moved on past it. Now, I personally am a firm believer on that particular situation. I think that was handled right. I wouldn't call that harassment. I would call that inappropriate, but inappropriate is a very subjective term, right? That's where the perspective starts to come into play. Things that you find inappropriate, somebody else might not find inappropriate. And that's where we have to make those clearly defined. And so from the female's perspective, what I think a lot of you guys have to keep in mind is not everybody has the same level of appropriate or inappropriate as you do. And so unless it's completely egregious, like if somebody just comes up and grabs you, obviously that's just not cool. You shouldn't put your hands on somebody who doesn't want it. But verbal stuff, that's where the lines kind of get blurred, and we have to be a little bit better at that. You can't expect people to be, just to understand your frame of mind that day. And what I mean by that is from a male's perspective, I've had tons of friends in my life that we've all gone out and, we partied and things of that nature. And I've seen some stuff that you would never in a million years would think would work. Like stuff that I would never do at all, I've seen work. And because a lot of times what separates what's considered harassment and inappropriate from wanted is, do you find the person attractive or not? There's lots of things out there. If you find a person attractive and they say or do something, you're like, oh, stop, that's cute, Or if you find him unattractive, it's, oh, he's a creep, he's so dirty. Well, I understand that perspective, but what you have to understand is the guy doesn't know that. And if he talks to 100 women and 50 of them are okay with it, he has no clue until after the fact which 50 are cool with it and what 50 aren't. And he might not be trying to win any awards for the most gracious person in the world. He might not care how he comes off. He might not care if he offends people. He might just be saying whatever because he's trying to find that one person that says yes to go home with. And so we have to understand that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying perspective. And just because you don't necessarily have the same perspective as somebody else doesn't necessarily make them wrong. It just means we need to have dialogue. And I don't think there's enough dialogue these days. I don't think enough people talk about stuff. I think that we have our perspective, we draw a line in the sand, and then we just sit back and try to point out to everybody else why our perspective is correct. And I think that we need to start doing more listening and less talking. Meaning, when you're listening, don't listen to respond, listen to understand. And so, from men's perspective, you have to realize that, there's quite a few women in this world who have dealt with absurd amounts of legitimate and horrible harassment and just horrible things that men are capable of that would probably make your head spin for some people. Men, you have to understand that they've dealt with that, and they deal with that on a daily basis. So sometimes the last thing that they really want is some random dude that they don't really know. When they woke up late that day, they're trying to get their day going. They've gone to the job and they've had a pain in the ass day at work and they're dealing with life. The last thing they want is some random dude that they don't know to come up and talk about their organs or their body or whatever it may be. They're not really into hearing that, and that's okay. That's the right. They don't have to hear that. I'm not saying that you have to keep your mouth shut, but just understand they might not respond well to that. And so if you're trying to build rapport with somebody, that might not be the best option for you. And you have to understand, you have to think that way. Just because you think it's okay doesn't mean that they think it's okay. And so I think that's where men kind of, that's where we stray, right? Because it's not okay nowadays to think like a man, talk like a man, or act like a man, right? And what is that? What does that even mean anymore? We're starting to kind of be a dying breed, and people are turning away from that. And I'm one of the old ilk that still believes in masculinity and things of that nature. And I'm seeing it kind of disappear. I'm seeing the lines get blurred. And the problem is nobody's taking the time out to talk to men and talk to boys and teach them how to behave, teach them what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, why. We're not listening to our perspectives. And we do have a perspective, and that's okay. We're allowed to have a perspective. And I'm seeing a ton of people commenting on here, by the way. I'm going to do my best to try to answer some of it because I think this is a good topic. Somebody here, Marissa says, exactly, personal responsibility is important to speak up in the moment what you don't like or even in behavior. Yeah, I agree. It is a little personal responsibility, but once again, there's another perspective to that, and that is if the person is legitimately afraid. If somebody's afraid, sometimes they freeze up. And so I think that's once again where the perspective comes into play. We have to understand and appreciate that. Um, I think that from the male's perspective, and I can tell you, me personally, it's very difficult. If I'm, thankfully I'm married at the moment, so I don't have to worry about the dating game anymore. But back when I was dating and I was seeing people and things of that nature, it was very difficult sometimes to know, when to make a move, when not to make a move. What are they down for? What are they not down for? There's so much stuff out there pressuring us to act and feel and do things a certain way, but then when you do that, you get ridiculed for it. And then if you try to do the opposite, you get ridiculed for that as well. So from a male's perspective, we get stuck in this like round room trying to find a corner to pee in. It just doesn't work. We get confused. And then if we get confused and we say we legitimately don't know, we get ridiculed for that too. It's like, what do you mean you don't know? You should know. Well, why? Why should I know? Who's told me? Who's sat me down and educated me on this and said, hey, this is what's expected? Shoot, I was raised by a single mom, guys, and I still didn't know some of the stuff. I mean, I think I had a leg up on a lot of my friends because I had the female perspective growing up, but a lot of men didn't have that. And a lot of guys had a father that was real old school, women should be in the kitchen and things of that nature, and that's what they instilled in their sons. And so then, as a female, you're going to expect this guy to grow up and just magically know that that's not appropriate and he shouldn't be that way. So, oh, my producer wants a pen. Here you go.
Or I'll just say it. You've said it earlier in show prep. When in a time where 50 Shades of Grey is as popular as it is in the same generation where this movement is taken off. So it leaves it confusing for the guys who are out there.
Well, and that's the thing. That's where the confusion comes into play, right? Is the mixed signals. There's oh my gosh, I guarantee you right now, if I were to scroll down on my Facebook feed, I'd find some woman posting on here about how she likes her hair pulled and slapped and things of that nature, and likes a very aggressive, very almost bondage type approach. And 50 Shades of Grey was like the #1 selling book and for women for what, over a year. I know that. And so the image that we get is women like to have that kind of approach, if you will. And so it's hard for us then to understand. Maybe not all of you do. Maybe there's some of you that are detest that kind of behavior, and there's some of you that crave it, and then there's some of you that don't want it from the wrong person. And it's so complicated, and it's hard to navigate. It's hard for us to know what to do. And as a man, if you don't approach things that way, then you're considered weak. You're considered soft, and then women don't want you. But if you do it that way too much, then you're considered aggressive and mean, and women don't want you. And so from a male's perspective, what do you do? I don't know what to do at this point. No matter what you do, you're not good enough. And for men, that's like a huge sticking point for a lot of men, is not being good enough. And we're always trying to rise to this level of good enough, and yet we're always told, no matter what you do, you're not good enough. And so it leaves us frustrated, and we don't know what to do. And then, of course, you have the other people that just don't care. There's quite a few of those. And the ones that don't care, there's really not much you can do about it, to be honest with you. I mean, those are the ones you have to protect yourself against and speak up and whatnot. But I'm referring to not the outliers, but the normal, like, average individuals who just don't know and who mean very well. Because that's the thing that you have to understand, ladies. The creep in the corner who is saying things to you, who's offending you, who's upsetting you, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say he probably doesn't want to offend you. I'm going to say that his mindset isn't, ooh, I can't wait to go to the club tonight. I'm going to get all dressed up, looking good and feeling good. I'm going to get my best outfit on so I can go on and just make a bunch of women feel really bad about themselves. I don't think that's what his intent is when he walks out the door. I think his intent is, hey, I'd like to meet somebody tonight. What his intentions are after that, who knows? Some of them want to get laid that night. Some of them just want to make a friend. Some of them, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want to be happy, but we all have a confusion on how to get to that happiness, right? And so for that person, their happiness is to eventually talk to a female that night. But the problem is they don't know what to do. They see they see certain TV shows where there's like a really suave, debonair kind of guy, but they don't know how to be that. There's the really, really funny guys. They don't know how to be that. There's the other guys who walk in like the peacocks who are just completely ripped and just look like most women want, essentially, in their eyes anyways. They don't look like that. So what's that guy supposed to do? Well, he shows up and he does the best he can. And he's have other friends. He watches. I had a buddy of mine. I definitely won't say his name. But for those of you listening, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about, I'm sure, if you know him.
And it's not me.
No, it's not Louis. But I had a buddy of mine, right? And we hung out with him a few times. And he's an interesting fellow. he says and does things that I would never, ever in a million years do. There's just no way I would do these things ever. Matter of fact, there was one time he went out with my buddy and I. We all went out to a sports bar, one we would frequent quite often, and the women there are somewhat scantily clad, I'll say. So we were there eating one time, and we were having a good time, drinking, doing whatever. And the waitress comes to the table, and my acquaintance, I'll call him that, leaned in, looked at the girl's chest, and then said to us, "Oh, you're right. You can see the blonde hairs on her. I'll say breast. That's not what he said, but you're right. You can see the blonde hairs." And the girl was like, and then she walked away. And then my buddy and I looked at each other like, "What the hell just happened? Did he just say what I thought he said?" And I bring up that story because you have the three of us were sitting there. Two of us would never in a million years behave that way. We see in our minds how inappropriate that might be. And granted, the two of us were raised by our moms, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. But the third gentleman, he's actually from a different country, and he's been saying that since the day I met him, that and much worse. But here's the kicker. He's successful like a good 80% of the time. 80% of the time, it works for him. I've seen him do really weird things with people, sometimes strangers, and the way he approaches it is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, but it works. So how am I then going to turn around and tell that guy, "Hey, you shouldn't do that. It offends people and it pisses people off and it's wrong." He's going to tell me, "No, it's not. More times than not, it's successful." And that's the mixed message right there. That's where the crux of the problem is there is no finite kind of this is acceptable and this isn't acceptable, right? And ladies, I'm going to call you out here for a second. Now, I'm sorry, I told you I was going to offend you, but being the fact that I have had women in my life, not only as spouses, but as a mother and whatnot, you guys can change like the wind, guys. if you had a good day, what you find is acceptable is much different between two different days, right? There's one day where you woke up, maybe you're either getting ready to, or you just finished your period. You're feeling kind of bloated. You're not feeling very sexy. You had a long day. You woke up late. You couldn't do all the things that you wanted to do. At work, somebody pissed you off. That same crazy chick that always bothers you really bothers you today, and all you want to do is go home, put some sweatpants on, and watch whatever it is that you watch. Right? That's all you really want to do. So that cute guy in the office that you normally like comes up to you that day and wants to say something to you, somewhat provocative. You're gonna probably not like that, and you're gonna probably call him a creep or get upset or whatever. It will not go down well for him, is what I'm saying. Different scenario. You woke up, you're feeling great that day. The outfit you chose is making your butt look especially good that day. You got your makeup game was on point that day. You're feeling good. You got some great news on the way to work. You got there on time. That crazy girl in the office that always pisses you off, she called in sick that day, so you don't have to deal with her. Everything's just working for you that day. You're like Parker Lewis. You can't lose. Then that guy comes up to you and wants to ask you out to drinks or says the exact same thing he would have said a couple other days ago. Be honest, your response is much different that day. But we're expecting him to know which day is okay and which day isn't okay. And you know this person. You even think he's cute. Problem is, your response changes. And so you can't expect him to just magically know what's appropriate today and what's not appropriate. So for me, that's why I'm huge on setting boundaries. And there's a difference between what's appropriate and what's assault, right? Assault, that is a whole other ballgame. I'm not really going to get into that much. Assault, if somebody touches you in a way you don't want to be touched, if they expose themselves, call the authorities, handle it, do what you got to do to get out of that situation, get safe, and then blow the whistle. Essentially, I'm not referring to that stuff. The stuff that you can get arrested for, that's to me is a no-brainer. I'm talking about the stuff that you can't get arrested for. I'm talking about the stuff that it offends people, that makes you walk away thinking that person's a creep or shutting somebody down completely or vice versa. And men, I'm talking to you as well, because you cross the line sometimes. We have to understand as men that what we find appropriate and joking around, there's stuff that my producer here even, Louis, the dope doctor, get it right.
It's Louis.
I know. But there's things that him and I will say to each other, kind of just hanging out as fellas, that we would never say in a crowd full of women. Not because we don't like them or we don't think they're funny or whatever. It's because we don't think it's appropriate. And then that's where we come from now is we don't know where that line is. And so for us, what you're going to start creating for people of our ilk is a whole, I won't say generation, but a whole subset of the population who now will revert back to just, I'm not saying anything, I'm not doing anything, I'm not going near anybody because I'm not trying to upset anybody. And we're going to take it to that extreme. Why? Because we're trying to be safe. At the end of the day, him and I don't want to offend anybody. We're not trying to upset anybody. We really don't want to be on the news about, hey, this person. So what we do now is, all right, I'm not going near you. I'm not saying anything. If you look, if you look extremely nice today, or if that's a great color on you or something, there was a time in my life where I'd be like, oh, wow, you look fantastic today. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that dress on you. Nowadays, I don't feel safe saying that. And it might sound extreme, but that's what I'm getting at, is we as men don't know. And to be honest with you, I guarantee you there's at least a handful of people out there with just that simple statement would offend them.
That is one big pile of shit.
There you go.
You just made it sound like creeps, though.
I'm sorry?
You just made it sound like creeps. That
you know
we
what?
say
No,
things
and that's the sad
that
part.
we wouldn't say around them, because now their imaginations
I'm sure.
are trying to figure out what kind of comments we make. And it's closer to what you just said right now. I mean, we're not allowed to. Well, you and I both feel
yes.
like
I like how you put the feel part.
we
in
shouldn't
there.
compliment.
It's very therapeutic of you.
Well, like complimenting is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Now,
and see, that's the thing, is I was raised to believe that women would appreciate a good compliment. That's how you kind of show your part of your appreciation for them. It's almost like a warm smile or a warm hug. Everybody loves that human contact or feel good about themselves. But now we're like terrified if somebody's going to take it offensive. And I think that's where the lines are blurred, and that's where we honestly don't know. And that's the problem, is what is okay for, like, this woman is not going to be okay for this woman. And it's hard for us to decipher, because it's not like you guys have a big t-shirt on that says, hey, I'm okay with this list of things today. And you have a different shirt every day of the week. So I think that we as men and women, I think we need to spend more time kind of just having dialogue about this. I'm not cool with the lines in the sand. And that's where my major problem comes into it. And that's one of the main things I'm trying to get across today, is I'm not cool with the black and white, the either or. I think it was, I want to say it was Matt Damon. Matt Damon came out and made a comment about how there was different degrees of stuff, right? Like, he was trying to say, essentially, the, what was his name? Al Franken. The thing that Al Franken did was Franken?
Yeah.
Okay. You're good enough and you're strong enough. Doggone it, people like you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. But anyways, no, the thing that he did, is different than what's like Harvey Weinstein did, for instance. And that was a comment that I believe that he made. It was something along those lines, just saying there's different degrees of it. And you would think he put the gold stamp on everything and approved all of it. People went nuts. And his old co-host, his old co-star, if you will, on Good Will Hunting, I think it was Minnie Driver, she came out and made a comment about his comment. And I think this is where we've been going, where I don't like. And her comment was essentially, and once again, I'm not going to get it verbatim, but it was along the lines of saying, you can't tell me that seeing a penis is, I can't be as offended or hurt by seeing a penis as somebody else did by getting raped. That was along the lines of her comment, where she was basically saying, you can't tell me what hurts me and what doesn't hurt me. Now, the pseudo counselor in me understands the idea of your hurt is very valid, and I can't tell you that your hurt is any more or less valid than somebody else's. I get that, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. And then there's a lot of circumstances where that's very real and very needed. But those are individual circumstances. I think as a society, we kind of have to have some agreements here. And so the idea that Minnie Driver, I'm not going to keep saying her name because I don't know her personal feelings on it, but the idea that somebody could say that, just simply seeing a penis that they didn't want to see is as bad as actually physically being raped, that to me, I think that we got to start drawing the line somewhere. Because I don't know of anybody in America other than maybe somebody who probably I don't know of any normal, well-adjusted, healthy individual would choose rape over seeing a go ahead. I know.
No, you just qualified that really well. Normal, healthy, normal individual.
I'm trying not to offend people today.
Yeah, don't bother.
So,
just go for
let
it.
it out, right?
Just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Man.
So, but anyways, my point is nobody, in their right mind would choose rape over just simply seeing a penis. It's just not going to happen. Why? Because one is obviously worse than the other one. And so I think that's where the pendulum has swung too far, and we kind of need to reel it in a little bit here, and we have to spend more time understanding perspectives. This whole idea of drawing lines in the sand and saying I'm right, you're wrong, that's not going to benefit anybody. It's not going anywhere. It's not helping anything. And so we have to start kind of understanding perspective. We have to start getting outside of ourselves and learning where other people are coming from and go from there. And I think that's a good place to start. I know me as a man, I've had to learn tons of stuff in my life, and I didn't have a father growing up, so I had to learn things the hard way, a lot of them, and I'm still learning. Every time I think I know it, life says no, you don't, and you know what, life is right. But what I do know is learning is good. We have to allow ourselves to be wrong sometimes. We have to allow ourselves to be open to the opportunity that your perspective might not be the best one in that situation, and that's okay. What's not okay, though, is not leaving room for that. That's not okay. It's not okay to draw a line in the sand and say, no matter what, no matter who, and no matter what circumstance, my way is right. That's offensive, and I don't like it. Well, okay. Where does that leave you then? Where's the room for negotiation? Who said your perspective is the end-all, be-all? What happens if more people think that you're wrong? Then what? If you're the only one that thinks that way. And so I think that's it leads to nothing good. And so this idea of, I've had numerous conversations with people in my life, and one of the conversations it keeps coming back to is this is obviously wrong. Well, what's obvious to you isn't obvious to somebody else. And what you value, your value system, and how you say that that's wrong might not be the same value system that somebody else has. For instance, perfect example. There we go. We all do this in our everyday life. Actually, we have examples of this every single day in our lives. That's just a microcosm of the bigger problem. Does anybody who's listening to this, and obviously it's a rhetorical question, but everybody listening to this probably has one or two friends that could walk up and call you whatever they wanted to call you, and it's totally cool. They could call you and call you whatever name that they wanted to call you, cuss you out, whatever it may be. And you laugh it off and you consider joking. That's just how you greet one another. Now, let somebody else that you don't really know come up and say the exact same phrase to you, and how do you respond? Exactly. And so that's what I mean is you already have experience in the fact that it's all relative, right? That's where the relative and the absolute come into play. So the simple fact of somebody cussing you out or calling your name isn't what upsets you. It's the relationship that you have with that person. And so that's an example of how things change. Well, you have to take that one step outside and with other people and realize, well, everybody feels the same way. Everybody has their own truth. Everybody has their own journey in life that brought them where they're currently at. And I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong, and I'm not saying yours is right or wrong. What I am saying is we're going to get nowhere until we start to listen, until we start to understand that, you know what, maybe the flower in that person's eyes is turquoise, even though I see it as green, and that's okay. We can both be right. Just because, if we're looking at a flower and just because the dope doctor over here sees it as turquoise, doesn't mean I can't still see it as green. It doesn't mean that it's going to affect anything in my day. He just sees it as turquoise and I see it as green. The world doesn't stop. My life doesn't end. Nothing really horrible happens. It's just two people have a different perspective, and that's okay. Matter of fact, I like that. I like the fact that we have different perspectives. Matter of fact, I've learned more from this man sitting across from me because he has a different perspective on things than I have from all my friends who have the same perspective. Why? Because it's different. That's how I've become better. That's how I've grown, is by finding people who have opposing views and learning from them. Not trying to convince them of how I'm right and they're wrong, but learning and understanding where they're coming from. Picking up books that don't necessarily agree with me. Watching shows that I might not understand, talking to people who I don't understand. There's tons of people out there that I do my best to try to interact with because I don't know them and I don't maybe necessarily agree with their lifestyle choice or their decision making and whatever. I don't judge them for that. I try to get to know them and understand where they're coming from so I can understand more. It's hard to be upset at somebody whose story you know, right? And so I try to know as many stories as I can. And I don't think we're doing enough of that. I think what happens is I feel from a female's perspective, hey, this person said something to me That's inappropriate. That sucks. He should know better. I can't believe him. You're such a creep. You're so bad. I'm going to out you and tell everybody how horrible and bad you are. Well, you're doing an awful lot of assuming there. You have no clue what this guy's. It could have been a complete misunderstanding. He thought you were okay with something, and vice versa. And from men's perspective, we have to stop thinking that just because we're okay with it automatically means they're okay with it. Just because we're not that sensitive, or just because we hear something that we're totally cool with that we don't think should be a problem, doesn't mean you're right. I've got a ton of guys out there, man, who that's their answer. It's, they love it. Matter of fact, the gentleman that I was talking about, when I would say to him, like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, and just for the record, we stopped hanging out with that guy. That was the last time that we went out in public with him, because from our perspective, that was inappropriate. And from our perspective, we had to continue to go back there and be patrons of that place. And people knew us, and we didn't want to walk in being known as those guys because we thought that was horrible. Mainly because we understood the other perspective. We understood from her perspective that man, she had to feel real self-conscious and really bad at that moment when somebody just pointed out something very personal that some random stranger just looked at and pointed out. And so we don't hang out with him. But if I were to talk to him still to this day, I guarantee you he wouldn't see anything wrong with that. Mainly because, number one, and we've had pseudo conversations like this, so I feel confident in speaking for him a little bit here. Number one, he would say, "Oh, they love it." That's I guarantee his answer would be that, and he's basing "they love it" on his success rate, if you will. Out of 10, let's just assume for the sake of the conversation, it was 8 out of 10, and I'm going to say it was probably that after knowing him for the years and seeing it happen. But let's just say it was 8 out of 10. From his philosophy, he doesn't care about the 2 that said no. He doesn't care. He's not trying to be a saint. He's not trying to be, the next pope. He's just trying to get lucky that night. And so his philosophy is, if I throw enough stuff up against the wall, something's going to stick. And the problem is, there are 8 that went okay with it. And so it's hard then to get him to understand that that's not appropriate. and realistically speaking, would you? Think of your own life. Think of something you do every day that works for you, that a few people disagree with, but works for you more often than not. How likely are you to change that because a few people tell you shouldn't? It changes the ballgame a little bit now when you think of it that way, because it would take a miracle to get you to change your stance on something that's working for you. Well, the same goes for them, and that's where the perspective comes into play. And so we have to work on changing that narrative a little bit and kind of helping them see something differently. And the other, I've lost my train of thought. What else he would say? I know the first thing he would say is they like it, and the other thing he would say is yeah, it works, and I don't care, because I would say to him, hey, what about those 2 girls that you hurt, man? What about those 2 girls that you offended? He doesn't care. Now, being who I am and the people I hang around with, we care. Right? I don't want to hurt anybody. That's the last thing I want to do. But you don't have to. There's no law that says you have to care about other people's feelings. And that's okay. I'm not saying that I agree with it, which is one of the reasons why we stopped hanging out, but he's allowed to think that way. And that's a hard one right there. Right now, I guarantee there's at least 5, 6 plus, however many people listening to this right now, who immediately got offended right then and there. Who immediately was like, what? What do you mean it's not? Let me give you a newsflash, guys. It's okay for people to be, we're on the internet, right? It's okay for people to be assholes. It is. It's okay. I don't agree with it. You might not agree with it, but they're allowed to be assholes, man. It's just going to happen. There's people out there. They don't have to change. And I think that's where the perspective comes into play, because my value system, it would be very easy for me in my value system to start an argument with that friend, with that, I'll say acquaintance. It would have been very easy for me to start an argument with him and to tell him why all the things he's doing wrong and how he needs to change, everything else. And it would never lead anywhere. He would get really pissed off. Our friendship would be ended, and nothing would change. He would not go into his daily life and say, I need to change things now because Trinity felt otherwise. He wouldn't do it. And I wouldn't start saying, well, he does this, so maybe I should. Neither one of us are going to change in any way, shape, or form. And that's okay. It's totally okay. He went on with his life. Matter of fact, I think he's married at the moment. He went on with his life, and I went on with mine, and neither one of us changed our perspective. I would like to think that he might have changed his as he's gotten older, as he's gotten married, and as he's learned more. So as he learned better, hopefully he's doing better. But if he isn't, that's okay. It's all right. And I think that's one of the biggest issues I think is going to be to get over this whole Me Too movement is we have to understand that not everybody has the same value system as we do. Not everybody wants to be liked. Not everybody wants to be that good person. Some people are okay with just being an asshole, and they're allowed to. We can't regulate that. That's one of the cool things about this country is we're allowed to be who we want to be. We're allowed to make our free choice. So as much as that person can choose to be a certain way, you could choose to not be around them. You could choose to walk away. You could choose to lay groundwork to tell somebody what's acceptable and what's not acceptable behavior in your presence. And I think that's where a lot of it comes down to is, I think it was Marissa who commented on here earlier, personal responsibility. I think that as men, we need to take personal responsibility in getting outside of our perspectives and actively look for other perspectives. There is way too much information out there these days via books, via social media, via websites, via movies. I mean, there's way too much information for us as men to continue to sit back and not know. And there's way too many people who are more than willing to have these discussions with you. If you don't believe me, just type in something about Me Too on your Facebook and see how many responses you get. A lot of people are more than willing to talk to you about it. So I thought you were getting ready to talk.
Yeah, well, I was going to say something because you said get over this Me Too movement, and me knowing you and how we've talked about it, I think what you meant is go through this movement. In other words, get through it, get through the other side.
Yes.
Not get over it. Meaning, because see, I know the people that do want to argue with what you have to say, they're going to pick up on the individual words that, and that's the other thing that sometimes we misspeak.
Yes.
And that's okay as well.
I'm human.
I'm allowed to screw up in the way I say it, but if you bring it to my attention, give me the opportunity to say, no, I meant that, or didn't. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Sure. Let me address some of the comments that I'm seeing on here real quick, because I want to encourage commenting. I enjoy that. So my mom actually, believe it or not, commented. She said, if you wouldn't say it to your mother or want it said to your daughter, don't say it as a guideline. And this is where the perspective comes into play. Is part of me, I agree with that. I think that's a good guideline for people who have respect for their mother and respect for their daughter.
May I say that there are things that I say to Dana that I do not say to my mom and daughter? I'm just saying.
Exactly.
I'm not to disagree with your mom.
I know.
But there are things that
and that's why
I say different to Dana.
That's why I say perspective. And I understand where you're coming from. And I think what you're trying to say is me as a father, now with my daughter, I would like to think that my daughter's going to grow up in a world where people respect her space, respect her choices, and not harass her, not go out of their way to be just grossly offensive and make her day just horrible to live in because she's surrounded by grotesque people who making lewd comments. On the flip side of that, though, I'm going to do my best to raise my daughter to realize that not everybody feels that way. And while she should do her best to surround herself with people that feel that way, I'm going to tell her that she has to understand that not everybody feels that way, and try to help her understand how to cope with that and how to respond in situations when somebody does those types of things. Because as much as I would love to live in a world where everybody respects their mother and their daughter, not everybody does. And I can't make everybody do that. And it's not likely that it's going to happen because to me it's going in the other direction. It's not going in a more positive direction. My mom also said, my mom was active today, if you do the behavior, you claim the consequence. And she said, per Dr. Phil. She's a big Dr. Phil fan. Yes, I agree. If you're going to do behavior, you're going to have the consequences. Let's see. Marissa, I don't know where I'm catching this at because Facebook is going kind of quick, but people who share things with you and expect you to agree with everything are very hard to get along with and keep in your life. She has also said absolute wrong or right is the poison of today, especially in a political environment. We all react based on our experiences, and yes, it's relative. I agree. To address the first one, I think that's what that is. I think that we have opinions, and we spend our time not necessarily expecting everybody to believe or the same way we believe, but trying to make them believe the way we believe. I think a lot of times we don't necessarily care if they do or don't right up front, but our interaction with them and sharing our perspective isn't typically to share it just to share it. It's to share it to try to get them to believe it too. Because what will end up happening is we'll share it, and then we immediately try to justify it, and whenever they have a rebuttal, it then turns into a debate and an argument as opposed to just, oh, okay, that's cool that you feel that way, and then leave it alone. We spend all of our time convincing other people why we're right. And I think that's where, like I said, the perspective comes into play. We have to start getting outside of ourselves. We have to start trying to learn other perspectives. Get out there and talk to somebody who's a little bit different than you. Get out there and listen to understand instead of listening to respond. So, my mom said, "Oh, there you go. This is for you, Louis." My mom says, "Notice I didn't say significant other, wife, or lover." So, you're going to get in
Yes.
a debate with my mom. You're going to lose on
Nope.
that one.
Nope. I completely agree with her. She knows I love her.
Yes, I love her too. I love you, mother. Anyways,
That sounded way too much like what's that the guy up in the house?
the guy up in the house.
Mother.
Oh, you talking about the Bates?
Yeah,
The Psycho.
you sounded like Bates Motel. kind
Well,
of
you
deal
know
right
what? I'm sure there's people out there would probably take that a step further. So, anyways, I digress. So the let me make sure. Oh, there we go. The tips I have today, man. I'm gotta get ready to wrap it up. So the first tip I have is change your perspective. Work on changing your perspective. Allow yourself some wiggle room to be wrong. Stop drawing the line. Stop drawing lines in the sand. Stop making things in terms of absolutes. I'm absolutely right. You're absolutely wrong, or vice versa. Leave some room for error. You're human. Your perspective is only yours based upon what you've been through. Somebody else has a completely different perspective, and that's okay. So get outside yourself, learn different perspectives, and allow yourself to be wrong sometimes. It's totally okay. And then the last one I have, as far as tips is concerned, is disregard the golden rule. And the golden rule, for those of you who don't know what the golden rule is, and that is treat others how you want to be treated. And as I've kind of hopefully pointed out very clearly today, how you want to be treated a lot of the times is not how other people want to be treated. For instance, I'm a very direct individual. I believe in directness. I don't like to beat around the bush. I like to just tell me the facts, let me know what I need to know, and let me deal with it afterwards. Other people might like to be soften the blow a little bit, beat around the bush. If the person who wants to be around the bush comes to me and beats around the bush, I'm going to get irritated. I'm going to be like, dude, just tell me what you want to tell me. And so the golden rule for me then reverts back to treat others, wait for it, how they want to be treated. And you know the cool part about that is you don't have to be psychic. If you want to know how somebody wants to be treated, there's a very cool, very well-known way of doing that. Ask. But the thing is, when you ask, you got to do the next part, and that's listen. You got to hear them. And if somebody tells you how they want to be treated, believe them. Don't act like you know more than they know. Believe them and do your best to give that to them. And for the other people in the receiving end of that, give them some slack. They're human beings. Sometimes they're going to forget. Sometimes they're going to say something that upsets you, and that's okay. As long as we're all on the same team, guys, we all want to be happy, and we're all failing miserably. We're doing our best, and we all don't. Nobody has the answer. We're all just trying. So cut people some slack. But yes, disregard the golden rule. Treat others how they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated. I think that's it, man. I think that's all I got today. I know we're running late. I got the 2-minute sign 3 minutes ago. So, but anyways, so hopefully now you know better, and I encourage everybody to go out there and be better. See you.
Do you think he plans it all out? Or just makes it up as he goes along?